welcome to More Than Words.
Yes.
This is exciting. We got a new format.
There you go, Liz.
What?
You get me uncomfortable. You talking about new format. We don't got a new format. We are doing it differently. You know,
well, it's the same format, different style.
Different style.
Which to me is like...
Don't say
different.
it. Don't say it. You go get me uncomfortable. You know how I feel about, let's try to keep the format.
And then we have a whole bunch of we have like different videos, like screens. We're in this cool place called Common Desk. We'll give them a shout out because they really do take care of us.
They do. Yeah, shout out to Jason. Jason at Common Desk on East End. Don't try to come up on us, just FYI, because you'll never know when we're here. This is in the past, just if you're listening to us right now. But yes, Jason hooks us up every time. We also had our launch party here, so shout out to them. They take really good care of us. Also, the people who actually work here are actually pretty patient with us, given that we just be fumbling around here.
Well, and also we treat it like our home too.
Yes. We bought all that
but
stuff.
It is like a home because it has like the...
We brought all that stuff. If y'all could see what's behind us, it just looked like we need somewhere to live.
I think you could fit like 12 people in here, and it's just us three.
And we were using all this space.
It actually is a room for 12.
It actually is a room for 12. See, Jaymie, so we have our guest here today. Jaymie is one of our really good friends, and she's going to be telling her story in a little bit. We're really excited. We wanted to do this in person because I feel like it works really well in person, and we want to start doing these in person when and if we can. So
if we can figure out the sound check, because the sound check was just funny. We've been working for 20 minutes before this recorded. Just FYI, just for those of you who don't know. Shout out to Guitar Center who was trying to help us out. He was like, "This is what you do when you hear the echo." And he's the guy. I mean, he was awesome. His name was Ashley. Shout out to Ashley. He was really dope. But guess what, Ashley? We didn't get to none of those answers that you gave us. We just went down to one mic. So if y'all can't hear us, turn us up. Get your Bluetooth. Get your Bluetooth on. Because we done did all we could do today.
Oh, man. Yeah. Well, anyway, so we're going to start our segment with our auntie moment.
Yes.
Shara doesn't know what I'm about to say.
I'm scared. You see me nervous? Like, my face is a little like, ooh, what's she about to say? I'm glad I got this coffee cup to hide my mouth if I don't like it. No, Liz, what you gonna say?
I don't know, but we are now on YouTube. For those that don't know this, we're now on YouTube. Woo!
Yes. Okay, first of all, just so y'all know, you can see our angles today. I just want to go on record that I don't know what's happening right here in this midsection, but it's really not as bumpy as it looks. I want y'all to know. I don't know if this color code.
Okay, first of all, that's an auntie moment.
No.
Right? Because the aunties would be like, wait, you got to get my right angle.
Listen,
I can see myself. I'd probably be twisting and turning to find mine.
You look great, Jaymie.
No, Jaymie looks amazing with her color.
That goes with the color.
We didn't coordinate. Yes, we didn't coordinate this for sure, but we do look. No. We always look fly.
And
so there's that.
Yes, which is this wig that I got today. So just FYI, y'all know I don't got my braids, but I had to put on this wig today because it's a hair day. We ain't gonna get into the cultural importance of a hair day, but this thing had to be ready to record and ready for some action. So for those of y'all see it, y'all can see I got a whole vibe. This is my Beyonce, not Beyonce because it's not as nice, but it's Beyonce for sure.
All right, so my auntie moment is so Shara and I are both coaches. Are you a coach, Jaymie, too? But anyway, she coaches anyways. Right. She's one of those people. She always coaches people. She always connects people. As everybody knows, like I'm moving over to the UK. What did you do immediately when we were having a cooking class? Oh, I have a friend in the UK. Let me go ahead and connect you. As a matter of fact, I think she's in Manchester. And then so there's the connections.
Always.
So she's a coach, whether she's certified or not, or like it's official. She's official.
It's official.
So when you're coaching, you're always coaching. It's always on. Mm-hmm. And it's this thing that happens to you, and Shara and I always are on the phone with one another, and we're like, but I'm not coaching you right now. And then a question will come out, and then it'll be like, well, have you considered this?
Here we go.
Or what would happen if this happened? And how true is that? Shout out to Melanie Ryan for always giving us that question. How true is that? And she does this side thing too. You'll meet Jaymie hasn't met Melanie. Yeah, you'll definitely meet Melanie. And so my oldest one, he's a Pisces. He's a replica of his TT Shara.
And I'm a Pisces as well.
Jaymie. Okay, so I got my two Pisces. I'm a Capricorn.
We know that. We
I
knew
don't know
that.
much about
You didn't
Capricorn.
even have to tell us. No, they about their money, their business, and they
Don't mess with my money. Don't mess with my coin.
My best friend's a Capricorn, and not just get bossed around. You just show up when they tell you to show up, and you talk a little drunk, but you still end up doing it. You know what I mean? But they're about their money and their business, and typically they are right. I hate saying it, but they usually right. Because they done thought about it enough and tried to figure it out enough. You can follow them. Now I ain't saying you should. Oh,
you heard that? You heard that, husband?
Don't get me involved.
You heard that, husband?
Good graces. Don't put me in there. I'm trying to get the good graces. I need that guest room pass when y'all move. Don't get me involved.
So the little one is frustrated because his friend is. He goes, I'm just really frustrated at my friend. She always picks the song of the day. And, because songs of the day are really important. That's why that's on our survey for our guests. We always ask song of the days because we have a public playlist that's going to be live soon.
Yes.
But
Look, Liz always being shady, y'all. Y'all know that was for me. That blink and that subtle slowness of talk. That's when she's talking to me. Because she been trying to put this playlist out. I've been like, can we get a few guests, Liz? Because I know you got 45 songs on there for just you. But what about
those are our songs. Like every song, there's some songs.
Allegedly.
It's definitely us. And then now it's going to be our guests. And then it's going to be our community. And I want to see how it evolves over time.
I'm just glad you asked for a favorite song or a song of the day because I'm not really a music person, so I don't have a song of the day. But your favorite song, and Cher already know what it is because everywhere I go, I ask for it, like even out of the country. And it's it's MC Breed, Ain't No Future in Your Front.
Yes. That's gonna be good on our playlist.
You better get to
going and knowing.
Because it's for grown folks.
Yeah, that's grown up talk.
I was gonna say no kids around. This ain't no fella. What they say in Peloton? Where they be like,
this is for grown folks.
This
is the girl class. So anyway, so the older one goes, "Oh, Noah, I'm really sorry that you're frustrated. That I can see why that's frustrating. What about it makes it frustrating for you?"
Come on now, coaching moment.
And I'm driving, and I'm like, "What? What'd you say?" He's like, I'm just making sure he's okay." I'm like, first of all, they've not been in daycare or school for a couple weeks now because it's the summer and they're off. So this second one is bringing up stuff from I don't know when, making it up.
Yes.
Right? And then the other was like, well, let me go ahead and swoop in here and do it. I'm like, you have been following your TT Shara a little bit too
That's your mama.
long.
Don't get the TT in there. That's your mama.
That's TT Shara.
He hears you talking to other people all the time, and you stay coaching. I'm going to tell y'all right now. I'm looking at all the cameras. Liz will coach. Liz don't know nothing but coaching these days. She practicing all her coaches, okay? Liz be like, I'm talking to your friend, and all of a sudden you be like, man, I know you coaching me. You done asked me 3 questions, and you said nothing about you. I know you coaching me. I'm not calling you no more. That's what I told her. I was like, I'm not talking to you.
Oh, yeah, but I call you and you can't
need to call her. I probably need some coaching.
No.
Oh,
don't do it.
Yeah,
no,
let's do it, Jaymie.
No, then I can't get through to this stuff. Okay, so wait a minute. So first of all, I want to put a shout out. Man, we tearing up. My little baby over there coaching in his age group. Not to mention, I felt like in that moment, and I didn't want to tell you this, but I'll tell you that I wanted to whoop whoop. But you won't get that out of me in real life because this joke is Liz be trying to do the Arsenio Hall, and I just
do you remember Arsenio Hall?
Don't do it. Don't give it. No, don't do it because she aging us. We really wasn't that old with Arsenio Hall, but you be saying trying to break that.
I used to watch it.
You was not that
I feel like our
old,
family, I always talk about like our family, and I don't know if other Latinos feel this way too, that I feel like the Latinos in the U.S., and I know I'm stereotyping and making generic comments, but at least for my family, we were always 10 years behind like what was trending.
Right.
So maybe I was like 10 years behind. So I felt like I was watching Arsenio Hall live, but maybe I wasn't.
It was that basic cake. That was that basic TV rerunning it. Don't know, y'all. I'm trying to tell y'all, go look
It's like the little butterflies that we used to have, like with their little butterflies on our hair.
Arsenio Hall was really running, Liz. Check the years.
I don't know. I felt like I was watching it
like maybe late 80s. Very early 90s.
It was very early 90s. We were definitely in.
I know I was watching it.
You may have got a rerun.
I was watching.
No way, Liz. I'm talking to your mama. I'm talking to Mama Developers. I can't handle this. Yeah. You keep trying to bring this forward. I'm telling you, it's rebuked. Okay, let it go.
Okay, but what other host walks in that?
It's true. No, it's for real.
What? Okay, host.
I mean, seriously. Even Oprah Winfrey get the cheers and like the she might give me a card.
Yeah. You get a car. You get. No. But who walks in?
You're right. Not
with
who? Don't do it.
Who walks in? Like nobody walks in that way.
If you're on YouTube or any video, I definitely wanted to disappear. I don't have a superpower, but that might need to be one I need to put forward because that was.
I cannot wait until Arsenio Hall is on our podcast. I'm speaking it into existence. We're gonna
tag him because I just can't.
I'm gonna tag him.
First of all, I hope he do come. I want to see how many things we could talk to him really about because we were young. What are we going to talk to? We're gonna have to get us an expert opinion.
Y'all might need me. Y'all just need me.
Because I'm telling you,
I feel like I was watching it live.
You were live, Liz.
I'm almost 10 years. I don't know your age, Liz, but I know I'm almost 10 years older than Sheriff.
And when we have and I'm speaking this into existence too, because we do that.
Yes.
When we have our symposium, conference, more retreat or whatever, I expect every single person that comes out there when we come out to do Arsenio Hall.
Don't say this. Don't say this. Don't say this. This is like what I want to do. Listen, do I get an opinion? Is this a 2-piece? Like, what's going on here? I don't want any of that. If they are whooping when we come out, I am going to just be like, okay.
You're going to love it. Nah, you're going to love it. You'll be like, yeah.
I'm just going to look at you, Liz, like I always do and be like, why are you telling people to do stuff like this? Just leave it where it was. It's a legend. So anyway, we're going to introduce our guest for today. So if y'all don't know yet, her name is Jaymie. We're not putting her last name out there unless she will put her last name out there because that's how we roll. But Jaymie, I know Jaymie. So at one of my companies that I worked for a long time ago, I came in like a fresh, hot out the presses, girl from DC trying to go in corporate with all these dreams. James one of them people, I told y'all about this before. When somebody tell you that name, they be like, have you met Jaymie? AKA, that's the way they know she's black. She might be just like you, right? And so they was like, do you know Jaymie? And so Jaymie Day came up and literally I met Jaymie within the first couple of weeks of me being there. And I was just like, moved to Houston. I ain't know nothing. My mama and I, we were so surprised that a company paid for you to get on the airplane to come check out our job. We didn't know what to do, right? Like, we living our best life. So Jaymie basically took me under my wing like she has done for so many people. And she basically was like, this is all the things you need to do. These are people, the players. And then she taught me the best thing, which is, okay, here's the social life. Okay, let me take you out and show you H-Town. And so part of the reason I'm still here is because Jaymie did that. But when I think about Jaymie, before Employee Resource Groups was at our company, Jaymie started something called the FAM. And it was just one of those things where like, you so new to, you young, you new, you moving about the different places with a company that you supposedly trust. And you're black, right? Like you may be the first person who got a corporate job, who got a salary job, and you don't know nothing about nothing. So Jaymie created what we call the FAM, and you all who probably know it more like Employee Resource Group or Business Resource Groups, it was the affinity version of that. And what I'll tell you about why that's important to me is because the community, Jaymie's always been who she is. Like no matter, she's talking to an executive, she's running a D&I strategy. That was the work in which she had done in HR. But no matter what she was doing, she always created community. And one of the best things that I've taken away from her has been that creation of community far exceeds anything you're ever going to deliver at a company. So no matter where you sit, people are always going to remember how you feel, right? That Maya Angelou quote. So that's Jaymie, right? Like no matter wherever she is, she's going to come 100% like herself. So all this energy, all this activity right here, this was the evolution of that DC girl trying to find her way. And having examples like Jaymie, who was just like, no, when you come in corporate space, don't change who you are. You just address your audience appropriately, but you be you. And this is it, right? So I want to honor Jaymie in that way by saying, look, thank you so much for pulling me under that wing, because I don't know if I would have necessarily been not only with that company, but also just in general stayed in corporate. Like I had a real plan to just go back and live real simply. We just want to So anyway, I want to introduce Jaymie.
Jaymie!
Welcome. Yes. So Jaymie, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was really your journey, right? Like I try to give them the context of the journey before, but man, when we talk to you, it's always something going on. It's always something important, and you had a really impactful thing. But we like to start with the diversity wheel, right? And you being a D&I practitioner and knowing that you've done this work and led this work, I'm sure you probably looked at that and was like, I remember this.
It's hard to forget it.
So, okay, you got to see the wheel. We brought your memory back. And we took that from you. That was work that you put into place in our old life, our past life. And so we took that on. And so I hope you get to see some of that legacy, that work that you put forward, just kind of keep leading the way. But now we're putting you on the spot. Now, of the diversity wheel, which are those dimensions best represent you and your story?
So there's two, kind of three, but the third one wasn't really on the wheel. Oh. But I know that doesn't matter. So the first one is physical abilities, because I'm currently dealing with that, like in a wheelchair, and been dealing with like for the last 5 years. Financial status, I think, was one. Mm-hmm. That's another one, because I've been laid off since 2015. So for 7 years. And so financially, my finances dropped. And so then being in a position where you're needing things mm-hmm. in people, but then not being able to like compensate people or necessarily buy everything that you need. Mm-hmm. So been dealing with that. And then the other thing that's not on there, it was kind of work status in terms of me being laid off, and for the last few years I've been on disability. That's kind of another, because especially for me, because a lot of my identity was tied to being who I was at work. So those would be the three, with the one that's impacting me the most is obviously physical ability.
So for those who can't see, Jaymie is in a wheelchair. We didn't position it this way; it just kind of happened that way. Jaymie calls it the VIP service sometimes.
Handicap is a new VIP.
Well, I want to go back to how you identified previously. Right now that you have your what you most identify from the diversity wheel, and you having to change kind of that identity from previously. How did that shift happen, and then what changed within you in terms? I mean, I know, like, you're obviously you're wheelchair bound, and you're also you have your financials, but within you and your spirit, like how did that impact that?
So that's one of the things I think that, and I know I'm probably skipping around, but that's one of the things that I think most people don't recognize, whether it's a company or just people, is what is happening to you. Like, so what's going on physically is visible. Right. So it's more so the invisible mm-hmm. things. And so like, I have medication for depression. I have medication for anxiety. I've never looked at myself as being depressed, more so in a funk. And that comes up because I tend to not want to put other people through kind of and I know other people will say this, I know she was going to say this, kind of the burden of me. And like you were saying when you're talking about your son, it's kind of that mom thing. It doesn't really matter what other people say. It's just how you feel. Like, because I said that once. And so what it does to me is it withdraws me. So it makes me, like my current physical situation especially, it makes me want to just be more withdrawn. Like, if I'm laying in my bed, I'm not falling on the floor. So then I don't have to bother my son to come and pick me up. Those sorts of things. If I'm not going out, then, we don't have to worry about how to get Jaymie in. So it's kind of like I don't like being a spectacle. So like before I go somewhere, like I do have to do a lot more legwork, like to make sure that I can get in someplace and get around and those sorts of things, because I don't want to get somewhere and then have to deal with that. I just don't. like
so first of all, you know I ain't gonna let that burden pass without me getting involved, because you know I was like, wait a minute.
I was just about to get my little coach hat on. I'll be like, tell me a little bit more about that burden.
So, and I'll tell you, just so I had been staying in. So then I had a friend who came to visit that lives here now, and I said that to her, you know, that's why I was staying, you know, kind of in, because I didn't want to be burdened, and it actually made her cry. You know, she was doing the whole "you're not a burden" thing. But then, and I've never told her this, and I know you want people to watch the podcast, but I'm hoping she doesn't see this. But that actually made me feel worse. And I knew that wasn't her intention. You know, she was telling me it wasn't a burden, you know, and she started to tear up, because I don't want to make anybody feel like that.
Right.
I didn't want her to cry, you know. So it made me feel like I needed to be careful even with what I said and how I expressed how I felt, because that wasn't, I didn't want to make anybody else feel bad. So definitely when it comes back to the diversity wheel, the dimensions have changed, because if this would have been pre-surgery, like while I was working, I can remember like things like race and gender, you know, those kind of things coming up. Because I worked in HR, I can't remember what that's called on the wheel, but you know, that was a big thing, especially in Orphan Refinery. That was, so where I worked was a big thing. But yeah, so the dimensions have changed.
Wow, Jaymie, thank you for sharing that, because and I can definitely see because I had a strong reaction right now when you said I feel like a burden, and it's like, I've known you for a long time, and what I remember from you, and you are still this way, you're a very vibrant person, you love life. I mean, you have your travel company, is it called Live Like Gold? Be Golden Travel. I'm getting a little shout out for Jaymie there, but she puts amazing trips together.
Right, and let me get in line, just FYI.
Yeah, but I can definitely see why you would react that way to someone having such a strong reaction, because it's like, you're already going through a lot, and I can't handle your emotional baggage when you're an able body, and I'm the one that's going through this. And now I have to then carry on additional baggage, emotional baggage from someone else who doesn't have this experience. Right.
Yeah, and just that, and just not wanting somebody else to feel that. Yeah. I don't want what's going on with me to impact your emotional well-being at all. So,
and as a friend, right, that it's, you know, it's just to get on my nerves. I'd be like, girl, if you don't stop talking about this burden mess, you my friend. First of all, what we talk about here? If I don't care you in this chair or not, we rolling. Like, and I'm not even trying to make no pun. It's just like we out. Like, this is who you are, the person that's in our life, and we care about you. So whatever that care need to look like, let's just do it. But the withdrawing piece, I think that speaks to me a lot, because I'm a private person, but I recognize how much in instances when people are going through differences, right? Like a shift in their diversity wheel, or just a lifestyle shift, you got to reach out more. And I got to practice that recently. I'm about to put Liz on the spot. Liz had the boys, you know, basically to herself this week. And I reached out because I remember, I mean, I know this probably not, I mean, you said this piece about being a burden, but I listen as a person who don't have the same experiences or lifestyles as other people. I tried to be able to reach out and be like, you know what? If Liz didn't reach out to me in 2020, I wouldn't be here at this podcast. Or if I don't reach out to Jaymie, then I haven't seen her about, we need to go out. We need to do something. I need to be in community. But those moments of, you know, it's not just about trying, like you thinking about it being a burden, but sometimes we need that connection. Like you have filled me up in many instances, as not just in our friendship, but in career wise. And it's like when you're absent, right? When those people who really matter to you are not there, or at least feel in that same capacity, that part is really still important. That connectivity, that relatedness is still there.
And I will tell you that, you know, like when you've reached out and things like that, that is very helpful because it makes you feel more comfortable. Mm-hmm. And even though, for me, at least in my life, like nobody's been, I'll say like, or unresponsive. So like if I've needed something or asked for something, like nobody's been unresponsible. Like I always say, like when people are like, how could you be so, positive or upbeat and stuff? It's like, it's hard to not be grateful when I've had so much, support and encouragement and stuff from friends and family. But so it's definitely helpful, I would say, when people proactively offer things, because then you don't feel like so much of a burden. For me, it's because it's just been so long. Yeah. It's like I just hit like my 5-year anniversary. So for those listening or watching, I had in 2017. So in 2015, I was laid off from work. And then in 2017, they discovered I had a tumor on my spine. And so when I had the surgery to have my tumor removed, I woke up completely paralyzed from the waist down. That lasted maybe 6 months or so. And so just since 2017, it's just been up and down. So like my current situation with me being in this wheelchair, it's been almost a year. And the primary reason is because I had a fall and tore my meniscus in my right knee. And that was already my bad leg. Yeah, so it's just a whole bunch of stuff with that. But that's the primary reason. And then my left leg wasn't in a condition because of some spinal cord things to kind of compensate for the right. So with the two together, like, yeah, it was just safe. It's safer for me to be in a wheelchair. But I am learning how to walk again.
And I think that's a good point, kind of give people the backstory. But let me give it from the friend side. So first and foremost, let me just go on record. So this is about to get real friendly, right? So first of all, so Jaymie tells us randomly, right? Just randomly. So all right, y'all, just FYI, they found this tumor, and I'm going in. They said I'm gonna walk within a couple of days.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I was told.
So we friends,
by the neurosurgeon.
Right. So we friends. We like, oh, okay, Jaymie, and we side corner, go around the corner, and be like, what is she talking about? This is what do you mean you got a tumor and now you going to surgery and this need to happen? So anyway, friends unite. We get the tribe together. We like, okay, Jaymie, tell us your journey. We will be right here, right? So Jaymie goes there. We all done took a day and a shift, and we all in it, right? And shout out to her sister who was in family, right? Like the whole family. I'm not naming all y'all names, but and her son, everybody who just was like, we here, we in there, family, friends, right? Like everybody had a day, everybody had a role. Jaymie goes in. We expected her to be out, like, okay, this ain't nothing, right? It's moved out. She comes out and it's like, oh no, now everything, it didn't happen the way it's supposed to happen. It was way bigger. I need to go into rehabilitation. So now we move into another facility. And when you go in there, it's like, as a person who's not going through that experience, you recognize the severity. Now a hospital should trigger you to do that, right? Yeah. But it's not. It's seeing that it's veterans in there. And shout out to TRIR who gave me that care. TR was, you go in there and it's something out of, like, you cannot imagine being there and you're like, people are literally changing their lives. Like, your life is totally different than how you potentially came in here.
Yeah, what you thought it was going to be.
What you thought it was going to be. And now you're physically and mentally going through a trial of who do you want to be now. So it just got real heavy for all of us. And we all took a day. We were all there. We were like, okay, we made her practice. Yeah. Look, when she had to practice getting into the chair or using her crutches, we was there, right? It was nothing that we wouldn't do for her. But when she fast forward, we get through rehabilitation, Jaymie on trips. We in Cuba. She got her crutches.
Yeah.
She's rolling. We traveling heavy. We in and out, and everybody it's so normal. And then the shift happens again with the fall. And then it's like, oh, we just waiting for Jaymie to come back out with the crutches. And then we all realize, oh my gosh, like things are not the same. And now there's a new reality with you in your chair. And so it's been this journey of like, not only trying to be supportive, but also trying to parallel create the new spaces with our friendship of how do you keep the level of friendship and love and capacity, and now coming to these different realizations about what that may look like. Because Jaymie and I travel buddies. Like our birthdays were the same day. We travel. Like we like, all right, girl, let's go. We went to Australia, New Zealand. She was on the crutches, and now it's like, what does that look like? We got new spaces that we need to play in together. And so I wanted to share that journey because I think it goes back to, you know, I had to struggle with even some stereotypes. And I think I want to ask Jaymie a little bit about like what stereotypes kind of show up, because I will say, because you are you, I didn't have any real, like, I just never thought about the
I have a similar story with Jaymie, because we did the cooking class together, and she made a comment. She's like, the table's too high for a wheelchair. And I said, it sure is. And I was like, man, that's my privilege as someone that can walk, and, you know, and that's my privilege for not even thinking about, what about a wheelchair accommodations? You best believe I did email those people. I know you did. Like, y'all need to be accessible to wheelchairs. But I mean, yeah, like how did that, you know?
And I think that's one of the biggest things. So even like for me, having been in diversity, but not ever experiencing, you know, any kind of physical disability. And I've even taught classes and put together presentations and things like that, you know, had speakers and stuff on, you know, people with disabilities and how you relate to that. So it's, but just like you were saying, and I find that it's true. So just like you have a white privilege, you know, you just don't, you can have a able-bodied privilege. And I had that as well. So things like curb cuts, counter heights, things that you just have never had to pay attention to. So you just don't. So it's kind of like a blind spot, you know, it's just something. So those are things that I never paid attention to until I had to. So, so not necessarily a stereotype, but blind spots. And then another one, like I said earlier, is, you know, people, you see people with maybe some kind of a physical disability, but then not understanding or not, you know, just considering the mental or emotional parts to that, you know, because there are things that I have to deal with that I'm pretty open. So I tend to maybe discuss, but I'll discuss it with certain people, but, you know, not everything for everybody. Not every conversation.
Well, it's such a hard emotional roller coaster for you because you had an idea of how your life was going. You had this situation, and now you've had to, like Shara said, had to figure out how you were going to redefine your world and your life, and who are you going to be after you, or throughout this and after this, right?
And even before you can get to that, there's just like some basic functions. So like when I initially had to go back to using the wheelchair, bedside commode, like when those things were even initially suggested to me, I was adamantly against it, because like the bedside commode, it was in my garage with plastic still on it because I never really used it. Like Cheryl was saying, you know, traveling with crutches and things, you know, having to go back to a wheelchair, which I had been out of the wheelchair since after I was paralyzed, unless I was going somewhere that was like a museum or something, like with long distances, that was easier. But so I was against that because to me, it felt like I was going backwards. But now I use both of those things on a regular basis.
But you know what though, Jaymie? I think that here in the shift, right? Like there's a lot of shifts that happen that I think people take for granted, right? Like you know, if I go back to some stereotypes that I now have to reflect upon candidly is, you know, when you see someone in a wheelchair, you automatically assume that it's either from birth or some accident, right? You can't, I mean, it's sometimes you just have to make those quick judgments to kind of label things and move throughout, right, life. But I then think about now, I am very much so more conscious of how I move around different spaces and how I encounter people who have different abilities, and whether it's physical or even neurological or whatever the case may be, it's almost like I don't want them to feel like there's any burden, that there's anything that shouldn't be considered, because they should be considered. Your needs should be considered. I'm able-bodied. I walk in the room. Something should be considered. Why? I'm tall. I'm a big girl. I mean, I can't be on these thin chairs. Like, I mean, there's things that we all deal with, right? Yeah. But it's like we have to normalize it such that you don't feel that that's a problem. Like, one of the things Liz and I was really adamant about when we chose, shout out to Common Desk, we did our launch party here, but we went through several different venues who said that they were ADA accessible, and all they would do was have a ramp from the door to the from the street, and, and I hope it's not on the street, because that's another thing. You got to be out in the street where the cars are going, or they had a ramp but you couldn't get into the bathroom because it was a step, or the event space had
or not wide enough for a wheelchair,
or they weren't flat, meaning there was like, ideally if you wanted to move about the space where we wanted to have the event, someone would either have to open up the door, or it was a ramp going down, or they said ADA, but they didn't have any space in the bathroom for you to be able to. It was like the
bare, and it's like
and
you're
a lot
already.
A lot of places are like that. So just because somebody says they're accessible, you still have to go
how
further.
Accessible.
Yeah. So those are things like even if somebody says, "Hey, let's go to lunch at such and such place," then I have to look the place up. Either I'll ask that person, and if they don't know, I'll look the place up and either email or I have to call sometimes, because it's like will I be able to operate in that space? And like I said, I'd rather know that in advance whether I can or can't, so that I'm not just showing up.
So can I say something real quick, Jaymie? That's a lot to put on your shoulders, right? So one is like not wanting to be the burden to someone and carrying that emotional baggage. And then also saying, geez, like now simple tasks are very difficult. I mean, I can definitely, and what I've known of you all these years is that you are a very vibrant, very positive person. Like there is nothing ever getting you down, and you're going to live your life to the max. And you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but what do I want to say? What do you maybe like hide from people that you keep to yourself a lot? And you don't have to answer this if it's too private.
No, I'll answer it. And I've already talked about it. It's really that feeling like the burden, and and then there's also some fear. I'll say there's some fear in there, and I don't show that. I don't talk about it, but basic, going back to some basic things. Yes, a lot of just basic things. Like sometimes if I'm in the bed and I want to roll over, and I have like if you want to roll over, you just roll over. Yeah. I have to like grab onto the bed and then, do all this kind of stuff. So it's a lot of extra things, and I tend to not talk about that. So I think sometimes that makes people think things are easier than what they are, because I don't really talk about that. And some of that is, I think, being a Pisces, where you just kind of cover up, you just kind of gloss over.
You put on the needs to everyone else.
Yeah, and so in general, this is where I thought you were going to go. So in general, when I brought up being laid off from work earlier, that was one of those life-changing kind of things that was unexpected that happened, and I was able to get through that. I just felt like, if it's my time to go, God must have something else He wants me to do. So when I woke up paralyzed, very initially, I thought that maybe my anesthesia hadn't worn off, because my surgery ended up being like a 14-hour surgery. So I'm thinking like, maybe that was it. And so, because the doctors were just as surprised, like Shara said, the doctor told me before surgery, hey, you'll be walking out of here in, 3-4 days, home for 3 weeks, and, that's it. I spent like a month between the hospital I had the surgery in Tier, and came home in a wheelchair. So it was completely unexpected, but I had gone through the experience of being laid off. And so that was also unexpected, but I saw that I was able to get through that and be okay. So when I came out of surgery, that's kind of that was just how I felt. This was something else that I needed to go through, and it, and I'd be okay. Yeah. So I think that's part of why because I was on that path at first where everything was, getting better, kind of going up, but then it kind of backtracked a little bit. Still not sure what happened, but just after a couple years, I got to the point where I could get up like from my bed to go to my bathroom. I could do that walk. So inside of my house or whatever, maybe, I might have to touch on some things or whatever, but I could walk. And then I got to the point where I couldn't go from my bed to the bathroom without either my walker or my crutches. And that pretty much, I hadn't been able to overcome that when I had the fall that injured me. And before that, falls were like, no big deal. I fall, I get up, that kind of thing. And it's different now because when I fall, I literally can't get up. I have to call my son. He has to come and get me because I just can't.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point to shout out all the caregivers. Like, I cannot, there has definitely been a huge shift with the people who love on you or in the immediate space and the care that they've been providing you consistently since everything. So I want to shout them out. But I also want to shout out all the other caregivers who have to deal with this all the time, right? Because I think that's just one of those things. Like I haven't been on this soapbox on the podcast, but I just feel like we are at a place where dependent care needs to be broader than children.
Absolutely.
And that we need to have more resources and responsibility for anybody who needs the level of care. We typically say parents or elderly. No, I mean for anybody who has a transition in their life where the increase in care is dependent on someone else. And the reason I say that is because there's so many people behind the scenes when I hear Jaymie talking about her story that every day is a part of that care and that network that's outside of the friend group who probably needs the level of support and love and storytelling around that too. So I hope we have space for that. But one thing I do want to bring up, and Jaymie, I don't think we ever talked about this, so I hope it's okay. I'm using my friend coins, right now. But I will say, there was a moment. So Jaymie has always been very positive. You've always been positive. And there was a point when we were sitting in your room when you first, like we were at the tail end of like your first surgery, sitting there, and he was like, and I was like, okay, Jaymie, let's do a vision board or let's think about what's going to happen in the future. And she was like, I don't need to. I'm focused on every day, making the most of every day. And in my selfishness, right, because I'm her friend, like we need to think about the future so you got something to look forward to. It was in that moment that I was like, that's what I want for you. That's not what you need from me. And what you needed in me for that moment was to say, no, I am happy fulfilling my full day this way. And I will never forget that conversation because we spent so much time thinking about what's next. We were literally sitting in there, girl, the news was blaring. We was talking. And, Jaymie's at the time was in a hospital bed in her room. And I'm just sitting there like, trying to be a spirit lift, meaning I thought there was some work that I needed to do other than just showing up and being a friend, like I would normally do on any other space. But because of her physical capability change, I thought I needed to shift. I needed to change. Yeah. I needed to start leading in some way. And that was that privileged behavior showing up. Yeah. And I had to catch myself, and I've been reflecting on that quite a bit because it's like, no, you don't need me to tell you to do something this way, or that you need to have something out there far go, or this is how it needs to be. I just need to hold space for you.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, you brought up a good point about the caregivers, and I think that's a group of people that people tend to not think about. So even if you think about in like the workplace, people who are caregivers for somebody, because when I think about my son and the things that he has to do for me, like he even has to get me out of the bathtub because I can't get out by myself. But for him, as I'm going to call him my child, even though he's an adult, he's still my child. And I'm older, but I'm not old. I'm not elderly. But the things that he has to do for me, I'm sure, and he doesn't complain. He doesn't, make me feel bad about anything. But I'm sure for him, those things are difficult. And so So we don't think about that emotional toll that it takes on caregivers. Just, again, some of those basic things, like I'll say, like even when you mentioned me being in the hospital bed. So when I came home from the hospital, I had to have a hospital bed because I had to learn to cath myself and all of those things. And my mom, who's laid off, she came down for what she thought was going to be my 3-week recovery. And she ended up being here for 3 months. But before she left, one of the things that I had to learn how to do was change my diaper. So that was one of the things that she had to do. So here I am, this 43-year-old woman in diapers that my mother had to change. So again, so the, just the emotional, mental shift that has to take. So here I am, a 43-year-old woman, and my mother has to change my diaper. But then for my mother, being and she is by age, I guess, considered elderly. Even though she's more physically.
She's like Mama D.
She's 75, and she's in way better health than most people I know have her age. But but for her to be that and have to change her adult daughter's diapers. So when you think about other caregivers that have to do those kind of things. So when I talk about, some basic needs, there are some basic things that you literally, either can't do for yourself or just need some help.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good, like what's coming up for me in this conversation is like, we don't think about the like very specific things, right? The privilege of me being an able body in my ability. And you don't think about, like, when I go home, I don't have that, right? I don't have those extra burdens. Yeah. So it's easy for me to sit here and say, well, you should be positive and you should look at the bright side and everything happens for a reason. But the truth of the matter is, like, it's hella hard. And it's, and hearing this story, like, it's like, I'm starting to think back at all the times that I took that for granted, because I am a very future type person. I always look at the future. I mean, Shara and I always vision board and do all that stuff. And it's like, wow, like living in that day-to-day moment, it's so important, and it puts everything back into perspective. It's like, today I'm going to live in this moment, and because things can change in the future. What about living in that present moment? What did that do for you then, and what does it do for you now?
To be honest, for me, it's more, I don't want to call it stifling, but it is more limiting for me, at least, because for me, living, for the day is different than somebody else who's being present in the moment, that kind of thing. Okay. Because for me, again, a lot of the day-to-day stuff is basic things. It's just a lot of basic things. And then just the, if I stay down, then I don't fall down, those kind of things. So that's one of the things I don't think people get. I know I'm changing the subject a little bit, because another thing is, people who, I'll say, kind of don't quite understand, but they think they do. And then they're like, well, you should be able to do this, or, you should be doing it. And it's like, no, I can't. And then when you try to explain things to them, it sounds like you're making excuses. And it's like, everything isn't an excuse. I will acknowledge some things are, but everything, isn't. And even with me in my situation, it's a lot better than some. I'm part of a Facebook group on Facebook for people with spinal cord tumors, and some of those stories are much worse. So being able to be more positive and things like that, I always think like it could be a lot worse. Like, I don't have what I would call real pain, and there's people in this group that have had to have like pain pumps implanted, and they're trying different medications and different things, to see what works. And I'm blessed not to have to deal with any of that. So there's some stories, or, somebody who just had a baby and now they've got this tumor, and, they're trying to decide whether to go through surgery or not, depending on where your tumor is in your body. So mine was low enough that it impacted the lower half of my body, but some people have one higher up, and so like their arms and things like that are impacted. And so that's another thing, is learning or recognizing that everybody disability is not the same. So like everybody in a wheelchair doesn't have the same issue, and they don't look at it the same. I'm also in a wheelchair group, wheelchair mobility users, I think that's what it's called on Facebook. And I refer to myself as being wheelchair bound, because for me, being able-bodied for most of my life and then being in the wheelchair, it's more so kind of a hindrance in some ways for me. Like right now, I can't get in and out of my car or even in and out of my house on my own. So for me, it's more of a hindrance. But if you've been in a wheelchair, like due to a birth defect or just since you were younger or so, they view the wheelchair as freedom. Because without the wheelchair, they wouldn't be able to get around and do things and live their lives. So in the group, I refer to myself as being wheelchair bound, and then I got backlash from other people in the wheelchair. So that's one of the things that I think, and people don't know that. So like even when you're talking about, so like even when I was on the crutches, like because people would just assume like maybe I broke something. So people would ask, like, hey, what happened? And then when I would tell what actually happened, and then they would look like mortified, and it's like, I know it's a lot more than what you were expecting to hear, because I think most people were expecting to hear, I twisted my ankle, or I, broke my leg or something like that. So that's a big thing, I think, is talking to people, because even in this wheelchair group, like a lot of people are adamantly, like feel very strongly about people coming up to them in different situations. It might be a family member or sometimes a stranger or whatever, and pushing their wheelchair, like to the point where they have like spikes that they put on a thing, like, and it's actually a crime, which I didn't realize. Like if you just push somebody in a wheelchair, like that's considered an assault, because for I guess a lot of people, it's considered part of your body. So just like, you coming up to a person, and just pushing you out the way or whatever, that's technically, an assault. So, so even with the wheelchair, that, it can be considered an assault. And
so how do people typically navigate how do you navigate that conversation? Because I do think there is, people want to know how to appropriately engage. I've heard people say you get down on one knee and talk to somebody. I've had somebody literally yell at me. We're like, why are you getting down to talk to me? Like, what's going on? Like, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And I've had people that I leaned over and I talked to, and they was like, okay, so you can take a knee because you're not gonna have my neck. It's like, and it's those types of things that makes it such that people don't want to engage. But I ain't that person. I'll be like, well, I'm gonna figure this out, and I'm gonna acknowledge the moment and be like, I'm so sorry because the last time that happened. But how do you want to be experienced?
Yes.
How do you need to be experienced?
Again, it's like meeting people where they're at.
Exactly.
And it is difficult to know, and the only way to know is to have that conversation. And I know that it's a difficult conversation to have, because I'll say the majority of people, the vast majority of people, don't want to offend or do anything wrong. And so they'll just not say anything to avoid that. In the pre-work, one of the questions was about resources or something. I think crucial conversations is really important, and it can help you to structure how to have those conversations. But that's, so to me, because everybody in the wheelchair, some things are like basic, but things like for me, I don't necessarily want somebody to have to get down on my level, but I could see where, if I have to sit here and crane my neck up and we're having an hour-long conversation, it's like, I'm gonna need you to sit down.
Right.
Yeah, because my neck is getting tight. But I wouldn't want somebody just to come up to me and feel like they had to kneel or something like that to talk to me. But so those are conversations and things that you just have to ask. I can remember being in Thailand, and I met a girl from America, and she asked me, what do you need me to help you with? And I thought that was, it really meant a lot to me that she asked that question, because there are so many things that you can't do that more often than not, I would say, when you're able to do something, you want to do what you can.
Yeah.
So it might even be, I want to try to wheel myself. My arms may eventually get tired and I may need you to push me. But, initially, although I'm not opposed, if somebody wants to push me, you can push me.
I wasn't going to say that.
Yeah, but there are people who do want to try it themselves. If I'm able to open up a door, I want to be able to try that. I know my boyfriend, when he first came to visit after surgery, he was scared. He thought I'd be one of those, what he called mean wheelchair people, because he had tried to help some people in the past and, whatever. But I think that's what it boils down to, is like, you have to have conversation with people to identify, what they need and that kind of thing. And like I said, I know that it's a difficult conversation to have. And some of the onus is on the disabled person. I can remember when I worked, and I had a supervisor who had an employee who, I don't know what was wrong with the employee, but the employee was taking some medication that made them very emotional. So they were in a meeting, and the supervisor at the time wasn't aware. And they were in a meeting, and the person just like broke out crying. And so other people in the meeting were having, a response like, dang, like, why are you crying, kind of thing. Whereas if the supervisor had known, she would have been able to kind of diffuse the situation. And I know, it's HIPAA stuff, people even in the workplace, aren't allowed to ask, but that's where I feel like there's some information that the person with the physical disability or whatever, or with the disability, if they did share, could make things easier. So like when I'm doing an interview or something, I'm very open about, what I've been through, and this is my condition. So like if you want me to come in for an interview, I can come in because I'm able to drive. I drive with my hands. My car has the equipment so I can drive with my hands. But like I said, with being in this wheelchair, I can't get in and out of the car by myself. So if I go for a job interview, somebody has to get me out and bring me in.
But I think you bring up a good point about equity, right? Like, once again, I'm sure the listeners as well as others, and I know we have to close soon, but really the piece around equity, like, right, regardless if we were having this conversation about a person of color or anybody of difference, the equity and what we need to think about the individual and the systems and the habits and the behaviors that we have to put in place to support people where they are and what they may need. I love that question that the person in Thailand said. That was really impactful. But I think we can do that across the board, right? Where it's like, we need to have more of these engagements where we're like, can't assume just because Liz is smiling or
that I'm okay,
that you're okay.
Because typically, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go for it, go.
But like, typically, really strong people, and I think Jaymie, I don't want to assume this, but you are very.
Strong.
I know, girl. I know you are.
I will give you that one.
But typically, really strong women of color do not ever want to, like, we have issues, and I'll put myself in there. Sharon knows.
Come on.
I'm getting all uncomfortable right now, so my shoulders are up. But we don't want to show that vulnerability. We don't want to be the vulnerable. We don't want to be the burden. We are typically the matriarchs of the family. We're the ones that people come to us. I just had this whole conversation with Mama D about, like, because my mom and I are both the same. I was like, Mom, I haven't figured this out. She's like, Mija, I'm 65 and I have not figured out, like, I'm okay giving my whole self to everyone else, but I am not okay with me being not my 100% self. And it's just like, if someone asked me, you know, and Cher's really good about, like last week, right? I could have just pushed through at home with the 2 boys, but she called me and the woman in Thailand and said, what do you need? Or how do I help you? My thing is, like, when you think about places like workplaces or anywhere there's a whole different group of people and you go and meet the needs of one of the questions that I always get from an opposing view or someone that isn't 100% on board or you know or anything like that, it's like, well, it's not going to be, is it really what's the word, is it, how are we going to meet every single person's needs? You know, is it reasonable? Is it doable for companies? And the one that I always get, and I'll be very honest, like, I don't know how to answer this back, because I always think about it from a people standpoint, and it's hard for me to, like, even answer this for them, but they're like, we're a place of work. Right.
I'm boiling.
But you know,
where's the video?
They'll say, well, this is a place of work. Like, this isn't your home. You know, we're not here to cater for everyone's needs.
Yeah, bring it.
But and I have real, like, I have very strong reaction to that, because I'm a person. You're a person.
Right.
You're a person. The person said, you know, go ahead, go on, coach. Put me in the game. Go on, coach. I got to put you in the game.
Oh my
But it's like, how do you answer those kind of questions?
Well,
go ahead, Jay.
I was going to say, like, from, you know, that question about the work thing, if you're the employee that has the issue, let's just say, or an employee has some kind of a disability or whatever the case may be, the company is paying that person to produce.
Yeah.
So if they have something that they need in order to get them to produce, and it's reasonable, what's the issue?
What does it cost you?
So you know, when it's like, this is a place of work, it's like, yeah, and the company is paying, you know, this person to work. So they're paying, you know, however many dollars, and they're expecting to get that amount of return.
Right. And it could be in what accommodation, it's called reasonable accommodation. That is the formal term for HR for it. But at the end of the day, it's really such that your work environment is fluid, right? So there's always going to be a need to understand what the employee's needs are generally, and then narrow it down by teams. What are your team needs? But then also narrow it down. And when you're on a team, you're not just a group with one name. You are a bunch of individuals that need to be supported. So it's like, when people give me that, oh my gosh, you get me hot, that BS line about we can't meet everybody's needs. You can. You know how you do it? You already doing it. You gave that person a job. You listened to what made them unique and different. Yeah. And you brought them into this organization. So what's the difference? What makes them unique and different now that they're here that you may need to support? No, I'm not saying that everything need to be a yes, but you need to have a transparent conversation about what you can do and what you can't do, and let everybody choose. No different than when you do it when you would bring them in the organization. Like, when you have a job description, you're like, well, yeah, we can't meet that salary. We can do this, we can do that. And guess what? You accommodate, you see them as a whole person. So how different is this? It's not different. Yeah. It's just that you choose not to because it's an inconvenience. Yeah. And whatever that inconvenience is, whether the company inconvenience or the leader's inconvenience or whatever the case may be, don't get it twisted. You don't have no more time. This new generation has given all of us the permission and access to say we need an environment that makes us feel that, one, we matter, like Jaymie says, and two, that you want us to be here. And when you say that, it means that you're willing to support. So I don't appreciate that conversation, nor that I did back when I was in HR, y'all, because can you tell? Because I was getting hot. But I will say that I just think it's BS. And I think it's transparency. Go back to your crucial conversations. Sometimes you just have to have the honest conversation. This is what I can do, this is what I can't do, but this is what I want to do. I love that. That's it. Yeah. Because sometimes that's what makes Jaymie a unique leader. Because Jaymie be like, okay, sure, let me tell you what the HR answer is. And she would give me the HR answer. She's like, okay, now if this is not the HR answer, but this is if I was you, or if I wanted to kind of give you a bridge here, this is what I recommend. And that style is what people would appreciate, even if you can't give them a yes. And I think 2020 and all the remote work that we're doing, I think this is why people don't want to go back into offices, because for lots of reasons. One, they can be wholly themselves at home, and
and not not have that expectation that an environment is going to give them what they need. Like they will then have what they need, whether if it's like a physical ability or a mental ability, or like just kind of that break, right? You don't have to show up in the space and have to pretend to be something that you're not.
Absolutely. That corporate drama that we talked about earlier, you don't have to deal with that. For me personally, I would prefer more of the hybrid, because especially doing diversity kind of work, I feel like, at least initially, like you need to be within a company with people to get a better feel for that culture, and to understand those issues and just to, be able to connect. So I do feel like you do need that if you're coming in new. Like if you've been there for a while and you understand all of those things, then I think remote is, a lot easier, but at least some kind of a hybrid, at least initially.
I would agree. I started, I had a new role opportunity, and when I came in remote, it was super hard coming from somewhere where I knew everybody. I would say it's super hard, but what I will tell you, and I mean, whoever's listening, just go on and just clutch your chest for a second. It gave me a new opportunity to look at work differently, to say, you know what? I ain't giving you my everything. I'm not giving you the loyalty or the ownership that I allowed you to have and accessibility you had before. I got to choose what parts of me that I provide here, how I'm going to navigate it. And I didn't feel that heaviness and that responsibility that loyalty typically gives. And it actually kind of helped me out, because I started looking at how I spend my time, like how do I give you the best of what you're paying me for, and also for me to be able to do it in a way that I can be authentic to myself. And I prefer that style. And if I had that available to me in my previous life,
that's that empowerment, right? Okay. That's like getting you, like, how do you take your power back?
And it would have saved more money with me, because candidly, I get things more efficient. Like when I have my autonomy, I'm sitting here like, okay, so this one, I'm time blocking. Shout out to my sister who helped me do that. But I time block. I know when I'm focusing on this, and that. And I'm telling you that I have a different level of respect for the work and what I need to contribute and who is a part of the team than I would normally when I'm like kind of lively. I get using that day in the office and be like, hey y'all, what's up? Let me talk to everybody. And then I figure out how to do work later on that day. You know what I mean? So I have an appreciation for that, but I do appreciate getting to know the lay of the land.
And I agree with what you're saying, because of times when I worked, but maybe needed to work from home or whatever it was, I do feel I was definitely more productive. And I know it's a personal issue, like my work day, like would bleed over where I could work all day from home, because, I'm at home. And so I would tend to put in, I would say, more effort when I was at home, and definitely can be more efficient at home. The going into the office piece, I think it's important just when you're new to be able to have some FaceTime with people and get to know people. And I know you can do all of those things, through Zoom and all of that, but it's just not quite the same.
One of the things to Cher's point, right, is having that autonomy, right, and saying, hey, like, this is how I work, and and being able to have that. So, Jaymie, I know like we're kind of going over a little bit on our session, but we knew that this was going to happen.
Yes.
You can edit.
Well, yes, I would get it. How did you get your power back, or do you have it?
I don't know that I necessarily have it. One of the ways, in terms of kind of getting it back, I know Cheryl won't agree with this, none of my friends do, is so I'll say, like, for right now, one of the things that I feel like is or will give me some power back, I have a trip planned to Rwanda and Uganda solo in September, where I'll be gorilla trekking and on safari, and just.
She's making a lot of faces over there.
Because she's one that doesn't want me to go. My son the other day found out I was going, and I thought he already knew, but apparently he didn't. He was like, you either take somebody with you or you don't go. Exactly. And I'm like, the take somebody with me is not really an option.
Yeah.
And me not going is not going to happen, even if I just have to go and just sit. But then I have to even think about that. So even that's part of that, you know, a lot of those basic things. So like initially, my primary concern, and I really didn't think beyond that, was how am I going to use the bathroom on the airplane? Then I found out that certain planes, including the ones that I'll be on, so certain models, like the big body styles, Airbus, the, you know, like 777s or whatever, they have wheelchair accessible bathrooms with the IO chairs. But then for me, that's another thing, because again, not wanting to be a burden, flight attendants have, you know, things that they have to be responsible for on a flight. So I have to be prepared. Like, first of all, I don't want to have to use my call button to call somebody to bring me the wheelchair so I can get to the bathroom. So then, you know, I have to try to figure out what I'm going to do, because it's 20 hours worth of flying. Because I know it's at least 9 hours from here to Amsterdam, and then 4-hour layover, and then another 11 to get to Rwanda. So, and then when you leave outside the U.S., you know, you don't have the same, you don't have ADA protections. So I did find some hotels over there, and this was a relief, with ADA wheelchair accessible bathrooms. So that was a big thing for me, was how am I going to use the bathroom? Because even if I can get on the toilet, getting off without,
you need support.
Something, any bars or anything, you know, is very difficult. And then I have to be careful about if I fall, because nobody's with me to get me up, and I can't get myself up.
Right.
So I did find some stuff that I need to get. I'm going to an expo next month, in a couple weeks actually, that an abilities expo that will have different tools and things. But then I have to be, so there's a lot of things that I have to think through and be concerned about. So I know I'll need to take the wheelchair. Some friends have been helping me with some walking, but then I figured, like, even if I'm able to walk, like with my crutches or whatever, I'll still need mostly the wheelchair. So, but that'll be helpful. Like, you know, if I need to stand up or those sorts of things, but then it becomes like, dang, do I have to travel with all this stuff? Mm-hmm. So I've never traveled with the wheelchair before. Okay. I waited until I was out before I traveled, and then I just hadn't needed. I did get this one for like traveling and stuff, because this is just one I bought off Amazon, but I have one that was custom made, and I call it my Inspector Gadget chair, because a lot of stuff has to happen. But just like they've been having those issues with lost luggage and stuff, you know, it's like,
you don't want to risk,
what if they lose or break? You know, this wheelchair I don't have as much of an issue with. I mean, it was like maybe $150 wheelchair, as opposed to like my custom chair.
But I do want to go on record. So let me just say, I am that friend who is anti this trip, and I don't leave a space without letting people know that. So let me run it down for the audience. So a couple of things. One, typically we, as a friend or tribe, even family, will try to go on a trip with Jaymie, right? That's not we exhausted the options at this point. So that was also the piece. The second part is, it's because of, you know, our personal fear for it's not about not having faith in you and your capability. It's about, once you outside of the support system, how are you going to be supported in these places that don't recognize or have the same level of appreciation around the accommodations needed for those of difference? And so that's really where this conversation, from a friend standpoint, or maybe from a caregiver, whoever is in the audience listening to this on the other side, because I know somebody like, well, why don't your friend go with you? Yes, we've all tried to, right? But what I will say is, you know, a part of this is, as on the other side of this is, you know, recognizing that this is a moment for you, Jaymie, to have your power, but also the powerless that we feel in this moment to say, we can't be there to support you, or we don't know if all the things that you have planned is going to play out the way it is, and it leaves you vulnerable. Yeah. And that vulnerability is the part that we're all trying to play with in this moment, which is, if we can't be there to help, or the people are not there to support you, then we just don't think we're trying to find our safety. But on the other part of that is, this is your power movement, right? So supporting,
because I can hear that she's very
excited.
Very excited. She's very adamant.
And I know that it'll be challenging, and there's a lot of things I need to think through. And So what Cheryl's saying, I know that's where my son was coming from. So it's not so much we don't want you to go. It's we want you to be able to be safe and without anybody there that and can trust. Right. Like, what if something happens? Because my son was going into what happens if you break your phone? Right. Like, what do you do then? So there's a lot of things that I need to think through. I'm okay now with the bathroom on the plane issue. That was like a major.
Your sister cringing because this is a conversation every time this conversation comes up, she's like, "Why are you talking about this?" But I laugh because I will say that one of the things about this, and I hope people at least heard in your story, is that all of these transitions for you, there's the group of people on the other side of that trying to transition and support and kind of maintain that connectivity and relatedness to you, and who just love you. But I'd be remiss to step back and say, this is so reminiscent of like the times we've been going through from like a race standpoint or from a gender standpoint for women's rights. Like we can layer this conversation, and I don't want to take away from what we're talking about abilities and differences, but I do want to say that this is the same skills that we would need to navigate any differences.
I think crucial conversations is big. Being able to, because I think a lot of conversations don't happen regardless of, like you were just saying, what the issue is, whether it's race, whether it's gender, physical ability, whatever it is because the vast majority of people just don't know how to have the conversation. Absolutely. So that's why I really like the crucial conversation, because I do feel like if we can find common ground. So like, that's another one of the tools I know we used to teach, was like finding common ground. Because if you can, no matter how small that is, and then if you can build from there, but first you have to find out, what do we have in common? So if I'm a Black mother whose son just got killed by the police, and you're a white mother and your son's at Harvard, well, okay, we're both mothers. We both have sons. We can start somewhere, and then we can talk through what the differences are. Why is my son just killed by the police? Why is your versus your son being at Harvard? But at least once we start somewhere, and once you find that common ground and have some connectivity there, you can build on that. You can have those conversations. Relationship is important, because that makes a lot of conversations easier. Doesn't mean that you can always still have those, but it makes it a lot easier to be able to have those if you have some form of relationship with a person. And especially, even like if it's a coworker, even if you just, have a little morning chit chat at the coffee bar, that's some level of relationship, and that gives you somewhere to go, as opposed to I can remember an issue. This was in like an IT organization where you had a bunch of contractors, and the contractors didn't have their name on the
like the
cubicle. So this other person, and I want to say the person might have even been on the diversity team, didn't really say anything to that person just because they didn't know that person's name. Right. So it was something as simple as that. They just didn't know that person's name. And so therefore they didn't engage in any kind of conversations or, think
about
anything.
The things that they could have missed out on. That's what I always think about, right? If I don't talk to someone, it's like, oh man, I could have missed out on. Right.
So when people are talking about some of these work-related accommodations, I mean, what is that to put somebody's name? And it doesn't have to even be one of the permanent, nameplates. Yeah. We have like the temporary bar where you can stick the paper thing in, because they're contractors, so they wouldn't be there. But so something as simple as that. So sometimes we allow those things that are very basic to be barriers in us being able to have those conversations, build that relationship, find that common ground. And I think those things are important, of finding the common ground and building the relationship.
Right. And also I want to add in there too is, one, we oftentimes tend to look at people's stories or their situation through our own lens.
Come on.
That's another thing. And intent versus impact, I think, is another thing. And that goes, both ways in terms of what a person is intending versus the impact that it has. Because a lot of times a lot of things I think, and I know I'm being, glass half full, but I'm one that doesn't think in general, I'll say, that people have ill intent.
Right.
Like for me, even being in a wheelchair, and I know this is one of
so
some of my friends, people for me have been more helpful than not.
Yeah.
Right.
When people see that I've got some kind of a disability, people tend to be more helpful than not. A lot of times it's me saying, no, I don't need it. And I always remember once, and it was coming back from Cuba, but I was with a group of people, and I saw this lady who just had all this stuff. And I made a comment about the lady, and then one of my friends was like, who had offered help, and I was like, no, I'm fine, I got it, and I've got all this stuff. But she was like, yeah, that's how you look. and it really made me think, like, oh wow, because here she is, like juggling just like all this stuff, like trying to get through. Here I am doing the same thing, and I've got somebody who's offering to help me, and I'm like, no, I'm okay, I got it, And
or the opposite of when employees or people ask for help and you don't do anything about it. I mean, how many times have we done some consultations or whatever where people were? I'll give you an example I just shared with Liz. I was like, I was working with a different client a while back, and they were looking at a new facility, and one of the things was a conversation about should we put the future mother spot. Right? Like we don't really need that, do we? We don't really need that because we want to put these people, we want to put some EV, like these smart cars. And I was like, well, what does your population ask for? Like, what's your demographic? Where are you getting this data from? It's nice that you want to have these, like, a fuel efficient cars, but candidly speaking, the price of the fuel efficient cars and what you're paying your employees, is that realistic that you're gonna have people there? One, and then two, you do have at least 20+% women in this organization who are in the demographics that could be if they're in between it. Wouldn't you want to put some future parent?
So doing things that are impactful versus just doing it because you think that you think.
I've always felt that way. Just talk to people. Ask them, and you can find out what they need, because I can remember even when I was at the refinery, that was always a thing, like when things would come from corporate onto the field, because things sound good in theory, it doesn't mean that they're good, that they work in practice. And so like we would always say, I remember when I left the refinery to go to corporate, they were like, don't, become one of those corporate
we put
things.
Using quotations,
but it was like, and what they meant was, all these projects or things that they would want to implement.
Make sure that it makes sense of where you're at.
It includes us. This is inclusive.
Because we worked out in the field for a long time, and it was like things. It sounds great, but you can't apply that to every single
situation.
thing.
So it needs to be able to adapt, or maybe you don't need it at all. Like that. That might work in an office environment. That don't work out here.
And I think from a DEI standpoint, like, I think that's why it turns a lot of people off when you bring in DEI work. And just because, like, it's like, well, it sounds like a good idea, but the reality is X, Y, Z. And it's like when we go and facilitate conversations like this, we don't bring ourselves in it. We always ask the collective. Like, we go back and say, what do you need? And what do you want? Again, it goes back to, when you have, I know Cher's gonna get mad at me, but like your trip, for example, right? Cher's putting her feelings on it, right? Her worry. She's not the only one. The friends group, they're putting they're setting you aside and putting their feelings on it. Rightfully so, right? Because they love you. They're doing it from a place of love. And I know that. And you're saying, this trip is so significant to me. And I am able. I'm not, and because you are a very strong person, I'm strong, and this is my power move for everyone.
And if it has to be changed, I know I can't do
certain things.
So, if I have to not do those things, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
Well, listen, and first of all, y'all ain't gonna talk about me like I ain't here. So let me just let y'all know.
Well, I have one more question for Jaymie, if I can ask one more question before, two. One is, what are you hoping to get out of your trip? Aside from your power, like this is your power to get your power back. What else are you hoping to gain from your trip?
I think even just for myself, and I don't know if this goes back to the power or not, just the feeling of I can. So like I can remember going to Thailand, and I had been maybe a year or so after surgery, and I had just gotten the controls on my car, like maybe earlier that month. So I had been a year of not being able to drive. I remember that post. Yeah, and it was kind of like, so being able to be in Thailand solo, because I'd met a friend, but I was there for like maybe 2 or so weeks, Thailand, and I went to Laos, like solo before she got there. Mm-hmm. But it just felt so good just to be able to be independent, mm-hmm. and not be on somebody else's time. Because no matter, again, how nice people were, about taking you places, you were always very aware of being on somebody else's time. Mm-hmm. So like if I say, I need you to take me to Target, and then on the way it's like, dang, I really need to go by Walmart. I'm not necessarily going to ask you to deviate, like, oh, I need to go to Walmart, too, because I've asked you, you've taken time out of your day, you have kids or you have other responsibilities. So I don't feel comfortable necessarily, asking you to change it up. Yeah. So being able to be by myself, where if I want to make a change, I can. So like,
your autonomy.
Yeah. So that's why even on this trip, I'm okay with being solo, because again, if I can't, mm-hmm. if I just don't want to, if I don't feel like it, I don't have to. And I don't have to be concerned about, am I messing up somebody else's trip? Because everybody I know doesn't like to, or just, doesn't like to be alone, mm-hmm. When they travel. So they want somebody else to be with them. So even just to go out of the hotel, just to go to dinner or whatever, they want or need somebody to be with them. And I don't anymore. I used to be kind of like that, but I'm not like that now. But yeah, so you don't have to feel that sense of responsibility for somebody else. You only have to be responsible for yourself. So in terms of what I'm getting out of it, I think, so when I travel, I tend to, and this was even before disability or anything, but I tend to push myself more. So before surgery, I would say, like, when I'm at home, I won't walk around the block to get my mail out the box, but I can go out of the country and climb glaciers and, climb volcanoes. It's that whole because I can. Things, it's like, and it's like that because I'm here. Yeah. I'll push myself more because I'm probably not coming back here. So I'm going to do what I can do. So I can remember even like times of, like just wanting to stay in my hotel room, like, getting room service or grabbing some food and bringing it back. And it's like, no, I'll at least go sit out and eat, because, at home, this is what I might do, but I'm not at home. So at least putting myself day by day, right? Out there. Day by day. Yeah. So, so I think that's what I'm getting, is more so to be able to push some boundaries for myself. So kind of even just to prove to myself that I can, and it'll be okay. Mm-hmm. So I do have some fears. Mm-hmm. And I don't talk about them much because it'll compound how other people feel. I think I only have one person who is supportive, and she's a travel client. And I've done a couple trips for her, but she's like excited about it. She's like, she wants to see pictures.
Well, I'm ready. We do got a friend that is very excited, who's been walking with you, and she advocated when we had the dinner talk.
Oh, but nobody's really excited about me going, to be honest. But I know that it's all from a good place. Yeah. People just really want me to be able to be safe, and they're concerned about the help that the assistance I can receive, and being in Rwanda and Uganda, which is not known for, it's not like I'm going to London or Tokyo or something like that. Because I even had a friend tell me, like, if you were going to Tokyo, I wouldn't be concerned.
Right.
But yeah, so
but I'll say what comes up even with Liz doing her great facilitation of this conversation is that I think this is not an intervention for the friends, but I do think this is a conversation you should create a watch party for it when this episode come out for those who share my similar concerns. Because I think that even in this conversation, you're sharing some things that you haven't. And I do think that this creates more space for others like who are listening to this, who have people who they're trying to support, whether friend or caregiving. This is a good time to pause to make sure that you're not putting your own expectations or worries on people that you're caring for. And also just to check in to see what's coming up for the other person, what do they need for support and needs. And I think that's one of the big takeaways I'm taking from this conversation, even though I still don't want you to go on a trip. I will say that the biggest piece is that, I need to intentionally, as someone who loves you and is your friend, who's been mentored by you, who is literally living out the legacy you planted way back when we worked together, like to check in as many times as I need to make sure that I'm supporting you the way you need to be supported. And I think that we've been taking that for granted. Let's talk about this always, like 2020, we don't talk about it enough. But I think that's the shift for me in this conversation is, I take that on the hard lines, right? Yeah. Race and women and the moms, like it's a mass shooting. I'm calling the moms. I'm calling the,
Yeah.
But
the everyday basics,
the basic stuff. Yeah. The fact that you got this trip that you are looking forward to.
Yeah.
That I don't put all my fears and worries into that experience, and I didn't leave space for your story to come up. And that to me is the opportunity for me to check in, not just with you, but other people about these momentous things that I take for granted. A trip.
And I will say this is that, so it's not necessarily a bad thing when you share some of those fears and stuff, because like with my son, like there are some things that I hadn't thought about, and I need to think through more what ifs. So like his thing about what if you break your phone? That's valid. He was like, break it or it gets stolen or whatever, mm-hmm. And that's a valid thing. What would I do if I don't have that? So I need to make sure I have things, numbers and stuff like written down. In Uganda, I'm not as concerned because I'm paying a tour company, so I'll have, people with me. But Rwanda I'm completely on my own. Yeah. I do know somebody who lives there, but it's like a friend of a friend, and the client that I have that's excited about me going, her daughter has a friend that actually lives there that she said she'll introduce me to. But again, those are people that have their lives. So even like the person that's a friend of the friend, she's my Facebook friend, I've met her before, but we're not friends. So, I'm getting a hotel, I'll plan my stuff, I'll plan maybe to spend some time with her, but I'm not I'm not going there and dumping myself on her because I don't know her like that. Like I'm coming to visit you.
Yes, ma'am.
Next year, just let you know that.
Our house is casa is ready for you.
Yes, I'm visiting you, and then I have a Cuban friend who's married and just had a baby in Copenhagen. Mm-hmm. So both of those.
She's gonna do it.
Be like,
I can't wait. I can't wait till your podcast comes out.
Right.
On like how you navigated through.
Blog.
Yeah, blog it, video blogs, whatever.
After my trip, I'll do a blog. I know that I'll create one.
We gotta record. We gotta try and record. Well, Jaymie, like first, I want to thank you for sharing your story. I think I learned so much from it. I hope the listeners learned so much from it. And I think we always end our podcast with a question for the audience. And I think we've posed a lot of them. One is like, how do you not put your own perspectives and your own fears into someone else's story? Mm-hmm. How can you really lean in and have those crucial conversations, brave conversations, whatever you want to call it, with someone else that is different than you, where you find that commonality, but then you layer it and really lean into that curiosity of understanding that other person's story and where they're coming from. and then saying, okay, yeah, you're here with me in the big moments, but how can you be here for people in the everyday,
absolutely,
in the basic necessities? Because we talk about this a lot, especially on the mass shootings, the one in Buffalo where it was like their grocery store is gone for that neighborhood, right? Like how are they going to access basic food? So sometimes it's not like these big events, it's these tiny little things that how you create space for everyone.
I also want to checking in, right? Like I think once again we have said it too many times and now it doesn't create the meaning, but like really just checking in with people, right? Like people we say we're going to check in, but we really going in to do something and serve ourselves to say, oh yeah, we checked in with that person. They good.
Yeah. Why are you checking in?
Right. Why am I checking in? And what am I trying? Am I creating the right time, the space?
Yeah.
Am I leaving space for them? Because the check-in isn't about me. It's about them. And so that for sure has been coming up with me. Like, am I going back to equity, right? What is that individual's person's need and how am I going to support them in that way versus what's the most easiest for me?
Right. Yeah. All right, y'all. Well, this was such a good episode. We went a lot longer than weeks, but that's just what we normally do. We'll edit it. Don't worry.
I actually have one more thing. Just in closing, is for people to keep in mind just to treat people as individuals. So just because your cousin was in a wheelchair, so then you meet somebody else in a wheelchair, and you think that because this is how it was with my cousin, that's how it is with you, to understand that there are differences, different needs, different desires, different wants, that kind of thing. So it's important, I think, to treat every situation or every person as new and individual.
Yeah. And I think it's very common for people to say, I want to relate to you. Right. Whereas again, shout out to CDI, where it's like, no, you want that connection. You want to really see the empathy and the compassion for it, right? It's like, you don't have to relate to every single person. And it comes from the uncomfortableness, right? If you're uncomfortable, you're immediately like, okay, let me figure out how I'm going to grasp this. But
and that's the neuroscience, right? Your body is literally trying to decide, how do I put this in a bucket so I can navigate it? Like, it's just literally.
And that's why I think, just going back again, I think those crucial conversations are important, and just like being able to go through that format. It's actually a book. And that's, like I said, I think that's a lot of it. People just don't know how to have the conversations. Right. And then that leads to, other things, like the person who didn't know the person's name, so therefore didn't engage that person in conversations and things, just because they didn't have a place to start.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or just start. How about that? Let's just stop. Let's just start. Let's just start with let's be awkward.
Let's be awkward together.
I love me some Issa Rae, an awkward black girl, and then turned into Insecure. But I'll tell you what, if you look back at the episode, she was just like, just start. Like, I'm going to say the most awkward thing and get it out the room. And guess what? Worst thing can happen is people are going to be silent or they are going to engage. And either one gives you the place of courageous practice.
Absolutely. Alrighty, y'all. Well, follow us on Instagram at More Than Words podcast. Send us any questions or feedback or anything that you have at Liz and Shara at morethanwordspodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook. We have a community connections group, and we're on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. All right, Jaymie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jaymie. Woo.